Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mike Kollin at MikeKollin.com. So, a lot of things are spoken and talked about and repeated and not understood. So, one of the simplest things in the Bible really is the tree of knowledge. The tree of knowledge simply means thinking. Thinking. And thinking blocks you from reality. It blocks you from yourself. So there was a video on, I believe it was Facebook, and it talks about how the sun looks different. It just looks white. It's like this crystal clear, pure white. And some people can't see it. It's because they're looking through their filters. They're not actually looking at the sun. So if you can go back 10, 15, 20 years, 30 years, the sun used to have a slight yellowish kind of tint to it. And there's a guy that came on and says, oh, well, according to science, according to this, the sun's color is blah, blah, blah. And I said, really? You need a book to tell you what the sun looks like? Why can't you just look at it? Why can't you just see it, hear it, feel it, smell it, taste it for yourself? As a world, especially the Western world, we are so conditioned, and the word brainwashed would definitely apply here, and hypnotized into believing, well, we need to read it in a book in order to understand it or to know it. I was on this walk on this trail by the bay, and I kind of walked by this lady, and she said something. I don't remember how she engaged conversation, and we started talking, and I don't remember what got me into this conversation. I said, well, why can't you just, okay, so there was a tree about 15 feet off the trail, and I walked off the trail towards the tree. I go, well, why can't you walk over and look at the tree with your own eyes? Why can't you touch it with your own hands? Why can't you smell it with your own nose? So I'm reaching over here and I touch this stuff that's seeping out, and it's sticky. Oh, that's sap. See, I don't need a book to tell me what sap feels like. I can touch it with my own hand. I don't need a book to tell me what color this tree is. I can see it. One of the biggest steps I took to get out of anxiety was I walked out on my porch one day. I just opened the sliding glass window and I walked out and I looked. Now I'm up on a small hill and the building I'm in is lifted up, so the garage is underneath, and I just looked and I listened. There was no gunshots, there was no war, there was no fighting, there was no screaming, there was nobody yelling out for help. It was just a calm, peaceful day. But moments before that, in my head, I was worried and stressed and about the dangers of life, and I just walked out and I go, what are you afraid of? There's nothing here. There's nothing going on. And this is what it means when they say to get out of your head. So I was listening to YouTube shorts, and there's this young lady, and respectfully and sincerely and compassionately, she's very much stuck in her forehead and in her eyes. Now, if you listen to the last video, I mentioned this. See, when we were spirits, we wanted to come into this experience because it is an amazing experience, and it can be very amazing. And because of this, if you go back to the last video, I break it down, but because of this Reiki attunement series of sessions that I went through, I think it was 8 sessions, is I had this experience of looking into the world, and I wanted to be here so badly. I got so excited. And for some reason, I have a video memory. It's kind of like a photographic memory, but I visually remember everything from coming home from the hospital when I was born. I don't remember being in the hospital. I don't remember birth, but I remember driving up the road. We lived on Meadowview Drive. I remember went up a slight hill. And I remember when they pulled the car up to the curb, my dad got out and he picked me up and he was so happy. And I remember the fresh cut grass. It was green, crystal clear blue sky. And I remember the dog running out, etc., etc. And I remember being so excited and fascinated. I wanted to experience everything. I wanted to see everything. I was so curious about all the sights, sounds, feelings, emotions, the smells in the air, the little birds flying by, the little noises they were making, everything. All I'm saying is this. We got so excited, we slammed into our forehead. So our spirit is about the size of our thumbnail, okay? And we came down into this body. Now, I've heard this before, but it wasn't until I experienced something at my nephew's birth that I saw it. Now, in the Bible, it talks about, well, I don't really want to go there, but essentially we come into this vessel. You know how they talk about like empty vessels like demons can go into? Well, our body essentially is kind of like a car. It's what gets us around. Our physical flesh is not who we are. We essentially hijacked this animal that we call a human. Our spirit came into this being and took over essentially. So when my nephew was born, they cleaned him up and etc. And they brought him back and they put him in this little incubator plastic thing, and he was up on this little table on wheels, and it was right in front of the bed that my sister was in, and my brother-in-law walked over there, and he's just looking and just like really silent. Now my brother-in-law's never silent like this. And I became very curious, so I walked over there and I was kind of standing not quite next to him, but a little bit behind and off to the left. And he's just like, and I remember I think I said, "Name him after me." And he goes, "Michael, be quiet." My sister Amber goes, "Michael, be quiet." And I'm like, okay. Now I didn't understand what my brother-in-law was doing at the time, but once he did it, I understood it. He was waiting for the name to come to him. Now, only a few minutes had passed by, maybe a little more, and all of a sudden there was this very subtle, almost imperceptible light that dropped down. It wasn't like super crystal clear like I'm looking at a light bulb. It was a very subtle light and it was small. And it just kind of dropped into my nephew, and boom, instantly, my brother-in-law goes, "Nicholas." And I looked at my sister, and she looked at me, and I don't know if I said it or if she said it, but it was like, "Did you see that?" I was like, "Yes." And it was the coincidence that whatever that little, and it was a very subtle light, little mini flash. I don't know how to explain. It was very subtle. It wasn't some crystal clear, but it was there. But more than that, it was the timing of when, bam, it went in, and instantly, a third of a second later, he called his name out, and I thought, whoa, that's a little bit too much. So there is this spirit, this being, which is really who you truly are. You are not this flesh. Now that doesn't mean to disrespect your flesh. You really need to love and nurture this being, because this being will feel fear and you will feel its fear. So you need to love it and nurture it and connect with it. And more than that, have compassion for it, for what it's going through. So this was one of those moments that was verifying things that I heard in the spirit world or in the Bible or whatever. And I was like, okay, so this is real. And it was the meditation that also allowed me to see things from this very simple perspective. And when I say the spirit world, I don't necessarily mean the spirit world, but like going to classes and learning about this stuff. It's like, okay, well, it's a cool concept, but I didn't really believe it because I didn't have an experience of it. And that's where I base everything I teach off of, is from the experiences that I have, that I connect to. So one of the teachings that they taught us in the 90s was that in hospitals, they did this test or study, I forget what they call it, but they would basically put people on this bed that was basically a scale, or they would that they would lay them down on right before they passed away, and instantly, the moment they died, the scale lightened up, and I don't know if it was 3 ounces or 0.003% ounces or whatever, but it was the same weight regardless of whether the person was 300 pounds, 90 pounds, 150 pounds, 200 pounds, and every time someone died, it would lighten up just that little tiny bit. And they believe that's your spirit. So having this experience, watching my brother-in-law instantly name my nephew, right when that subtle light dropped in, that was a huge convincer. It was something that I was there, I saw it, I felt it, I experienced it. I guess I've always been one of those people that if I read it in a book or hear it in a class, oh, that's nice. But I want to experience it. That was my biggest thing. I have to see this, hear this, and feel this for my own self. And yet, the Western world that we live in is all about book knowledge. Book knowledge, going to college some more, reading more books and books and books. It conditions you to believe that if you didn't learn it in a book, then it's not real. And that's where we're at in society right now. People don't have the ability to see something right in front of their face, to hear it, to feel it, and realize, oh, this is real, or this is what I'm experiencing. They completely wipe that away and say, well, I didn't read it in a book, no teacher taught this to me, so it can't be real. I'm like, are you joking? It just hit you upside the head. So what we're talking about is the tree of knowledge, the logical brain, which is book smart, book knowledge, which has nothing to do with actual experience. So this is only 7% of knowledge. 93% of knowledge is actually having the experience. So when our spirit came into this world, just like when it dropped down to my nephew Nicholas, his eyes popped open, he looked out, and you could see this energy, the spirit ramming into his forehead, ramming into his eyes, and just excited about the world and looking around and what's going on, like, what is this? Just like when I was born. So here's all I'm trying to say. This actually limits you from using the fullness of all your senses and all your neurology. And it causes you to think and think and think and think, and what this does is it blocks out reality. It's putting a wall between you and what is actually in front of you, what you're seeing, what you're walking on, the path, the grass. 2 videos ago, I mentioned how I went through my awakening and how I looked at my hands, and it was like I saw them for the first time in 15 years. Well, the human nervous system, our brain, is exactly like a computer. We have a history and a cache, just like a computer. Now, how I know this is whenever I go through a clearing, you literally clear your history and you clear your cache, and all of a sudden everything is fresh. You're looking at the trees, everything is new. When you listen to a friend that you've known for years, it's like you're listening to them for the first time in years. You're hearing them. So on your computer, if you don't know this, but I'm sure you do, like I have an Apple computer, and you can go up at the top and you can go to develop and drop down and empty the cache, or like I have Safari, I can go over to that and drop down and clear the history and the cache. Okay? So the reason why this was originally developed to clear the history and the cache is because, especially the older computers, it would, when you start it and you go to a website for the first time, it would go out on the internet, www.mikekollin.com or whatever, and then it would grab whatever page you were on and it would bring all the information, the images, into your computer, and it would hold it, store it in the history and or the cache. Okay? So then the next time you go out, well, it doesn't actually leave your computer and go onto the internet. It just first looks into your cache because it's a lot faster. And it goes, oh, we have this page right here, and it brings it up. But what if somebody changed that page between the last time you saw it and now? So let's say you haven't looked for that page for a week or a month or a year. So you're looking at something that's a year old or 2 years old. You're not actually seeing the original website the way it is today after they've made the new changes. And what happens is when you clear that through energy healing, all of a sudden you're seeing, hearing, feeling, and smelling and tasting things for right now the way it is. One of the ways you do this is by meditating to the point where you have absolute clarity. I remember when I finally started getting to that level, probably at the year 2 or maybe a year, 9 months, I don't remember, but it took a while. And I remember just like, okay, I've got to go to the grocery store and I got to grab something. And the store was like literally right around the corner. And I remember I parked and I walked in and everything was different. It was like there was no thoughts. There was no thinking at all. Which meant there was no judgment and there was no projections. I was just there in the moment, talking to people for where they were at in that moment versus what I stored in my memory for who they are. And the coolest thing that I realized was I had no anxiety, I had no fear. It was like that was all gone. And I was back to, whoa, like life was cool again. I wanted to talk to people. I wanted to go places. I wanted to go to the coffee shop and see what it was like there. You know, it was a really cool, I don't want to say it was because it's a repeating experience the more you meditate. And I noticed if I meditated for 2 hours, I could have that meditational space for about an hour in public. And I remember the first time was I noticed I was coming out of it, and I was like, oh no, and I didn't like it. So I immediately ran home, and I began to meditate. And then I went out, for another hour or 2 hours, and I went out again, and I was like, wow, this is so cool. And then, of course, about half the time that I meditated, I started coming out of again. And it was it was upsetting to some degree, but I knew I could always get it back. So for that next year or two, man, I would, and see, this is what caused me to meditate longer and longer and longer and longer. Next thing you know, on the weekends, I'd be meditating like 8 hours, right? Because then I could go out in public or even be with my girlfriend for 4 hours and I wouldn't get caught up in the ego. I wouldn't get caught up in the tree of knowledge, the thinking. Because the thinking is what blocks out reality. So the more energy healing you do, the more clearing you do, the more learning how to let go of thinking just allows you to experience life like when you were a little kid. You know, you're 3 years old, you ran out on the fresh cut grass and you smelled it. And it was so fresh and it was so clean, and it was just like, it was stimulating. And the color of the vibrant green. You know, I remember when I started really getting into meditation, it might have been the first and a half, second year, but me and my girlfriend went up by Lake Berryessa, and we went up by the dam. There's a little place where you can park there. And right across the little road, just a 2-lane road, you know, one lane going one way, one the other. And there's this hill, this mountain coming down. And I remember these little plants were growing out of it. And I turned around and I looked. And the sun was kind of just over the hill, but it was still pretty bright. It was about 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. But it had shade right there. And I was like, wow. And my girlfriend's looking at me. And I went over there. She goes, what are you looking at? I go, look at these little plants. They're glowing. And she's smiling and she's like, you can see that? I'm like, yeah. I began to realize she had mentioned stuff like this before. And I'm like, okay, you're a little weird, because I was Mr. Left Brain. I was a young man. I didn't see it because I wasn't tuned into my right brain, the 5 senses. And I started having these amazing experiences. One of the experiences was, I used to get mad at her whenever she would say, oh, look at that color. It's fuchsia. It's so cute. And I'm like, oh, God. I go, just call it pink. It's frickin'. She goes, baby, it's not. That's fuchsia. Well, I couldn't tell being in my left brain unless you brought out an art palette and you had all the 5 shades of pink, from Pepto-Bismol pink to, I forget the other name, but then one of them is called fuchsia. And when you put them right next to each other, like, oh, there is a difference. But when you didn't, you're just at the mall or store looking at a shirt that has a fuchsia stripe in it, or it's like, how, you know, I didn't understand how she could tell. And I honestly thought she was just making it up. Until I could see. Once was lost, but now am found. You have eyes, yet you cannot see. You have ears, yet you cannot hear. So I'm going to show you a page from my NLP manual. And I kind of almost don't want to show it to you because it'll get you in your thinking brain, and it's not about that, but it will show you something. See, we have these things called filters. Look right in the middle at the top of the skull. It says filters, and it says delete, distort, and generalize. Our brain will do this to kind of control the information coming in and out. And then what it does, it creates an internal representation, but that's not real. So we have all these filters, such as our language is a filter, our memories, our rules, our values, something called a metaprogram, our beliefs. These are all filters that we filter everything through. So it doesn't go through one filter, it goes through multiple filters, and it changes the meaning of what you're actually experiencing. So when you go through an energy healing, clearing, you'll begin to experience the world for exactly the way it is. You'll begin to experience yourself for the way you are in the moment. Meditation can bring you to this state as well. So essentially what we're doing is we are letting go of all of these filters, and we're just seeing, hearing, feeling, smelling, and tasting things for the way they are. And this is what I call emotional freedom. All the rules you were taught in church, in your home, your family, the school, all the beliefs that you were taught, everything, even the poor decisions you made at a very, very young age, they not only do they not apply, they're not even real, yet you feel like you're boxed in by these rules, beliefs, decisions, values that were pushed onto you because you grew up in a certain church or certain culture that are not even real. They're literally made up. When you wake up, you'll start to realize all these rules and beliefs that you were taught as a child, they're not real. Beliefs are not real. Rules are not real. They are literally, people come together, they make them up because it benefits them. It may not benefit you. They don't really care. But you live by them like a computer, like a robot. So one of the days, it was early on, it was the first week when I finally popped open after meditating for months and months and months, maybe even over a year. And I went to the grocery store, and it wasn't the first time I went, but it was the first week. And I remember I bought something, the cashier rung me up, and the bagger was bagging it. And I think I had asked them a question, or maybe somebody asked them a question. And I remember them going to this robotic, like they were looking up and down this list of answers, of possibilities, of information. And I was like, whoa. It was like they were a robot. They were not human. I could finally see that they were going through a computer screen of all this digital information. And it was exactly like the Terminator. So what happened was he essentially had this screen that would pop up whenever he needed it, and he would like analyze everything, and it would be all this digital information would pop up. And it was exactly like this Terminator. He would just scanning all this information, be going up and down on the screen in his eye, and he would just analyze everything and analyze everyone. And so here I am watching this kid, this cashier, and I was like, what the hell? Like you could see people look down to the left and kind of go up and down like they were scanning. And I started noticing everybody was doing it. So going all the way back to the beginning of this video, there is this young lady on YouTube Shorts, and she's reading a proverb, out of the Bible 4:23, etc. From the heart, the mouth speaks, etc. And she says something that caught my attention. She says, the heart, like, renew my heart like Christ. So she says, I think it means, and right there, it wasn't just the word, but the whole time she's talking, she's using push energy. It's linear, logical, left brain, tree of knowledge. And like, yeah, she doesn't know what she's talking about. I mean, she read a book, she read a lot of books, she read words, but she's never experienced it. And therefore, she doesn't know that she doesn't know what she's talking about. And then she says, I think it means to renew your heart, to refresh your heart. And that is true, but to think it versus feeling it and happening it's like looking at water. You're standing outside of the water and you say, well, I think it's going to feel like this. I think it's going to feel like that. I think it's going to be cold. I think it's going to, like, jump in, get in the water. Why are you thinking about it? Stop thinking and start doing. Touch the tree. Feel the tree. Smell the sap. Feel what the sap feels like. People could literally be eating food and they're going to go into the memory banks like the Terminator, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and all this digital information is going to come up of what they're supposed to say, of what it's supposed to taste like, of this is what the book says, this is what a lemon tastes like, versus just freaking tasting the sandwich. If you ever come to pure consciousness through meditation, etc., you're going to be blown away at how people are robots. It is the most incredible experience to watch and see consciously. So this young lady in this video, in this short, says something about, give me the heart of Christ. And I simply wrote, the heart of Christ is clarity. No thinking, just open awareness. From this space, it's like your heart, there's no energy, there's no ping pong, there's just, it's an empty spaciousness, but it's an open spaciousness. It's pure compassion. There's zero beliefs, there's no judgment at all. Judgment is a left brain process. Beliefs our left brain process. Rules, the left brain is about rules, structure, and organization. That's how it processes. See, when you come out of that and drop down into your body, you're just in the present moment. When I went through my spiritual awakening, I suddenly understood the Bible. It was the most amazing experience on the planet. It was like, because there was nothing, there was no past, well, this is what Pastor so-and-so said it means, and this is what so-and-so says it means, this is what they think it is. That was all gone. You were just reading it and receiving the words from purity for what they are, not what someone believes they are. I remember I called Pastor Rex about a week or two later, and I said, I have got to share something with you. I don't know if I'm losing my mind. And I said, I don't know if I'm completely wrong about the Bible or if I actually get it. So I started sharing. I go, Jesus says, if you believe, you shall receive whatever you ask for in prayer. And he said, yeah. I go, is that real? He goes, yes. And I started rattling off all these verses, and he goes, yes. And you might be like, well, how do you know this? Did you get your biblical doctorate degree? No. In fact, getting your biblical doctorate degree will take you into the tree of knowledge and rules and beliefs and all that bullshit and structure, and this is what you're supposed to say, and this is the way you're supposed to say it. It has nothing to do with what it's actually about. Here's all I'm saying. I'm going to make it really simple. This whole video, in fact, this video and the last two videos were about one thing. To be at one, atonement. To let go of every thought you have, to completely clear the slate, to find that space of nothingness. And then you will experience everything. See, ultimately what you've always wanted from every goal you've set is, and even from sex, it gives you a sense of temporary contentment afterwards. What I'm saying is begin to develop and create that contentment now. Start learning how to slow down. Actively do your deep breathing techniques 2-3 times a day. Meditate 20 minutes, 30 minutes a day. Pray with silence to listen to the messages coming to you. When you silence your mind, all of a sudden you become aware of these subtle thoughts, these subtle awarenesses. Start to stretch 15 minutes a day, twice a day. Start to take naps. Do anything that develops this clarity, that takes you in that direction of absolute nothingness. Not a single thought, just empty space. The internal awareness course, The Art of Letting Go, it teaches you techniques to do this, and it also teaches you what I call walking meditation, to where you can be in a conversation with someone and be in this internal awareness space of nothingness. To walk around in this space where you have this expansive awareness that calms your mind down it's not only an amazing experience, but it's what you've wanted. Because when you have conversations with people from this space, there's no pre-thinking, there's no prejudgment, there's no rules, there's no values, there's no filters, there's just there. And yes, I do teach a course on this, and I also can coach this with you in one-on-one coaching. There's an amazing happiness and joy that happens in this space. And for those of you who are with tons of anxiety, narcissist abuse, believe it or not, but you're creating all this inside. You have to learn how to uncreate it. And then begin creating what you want. That's how simple life becomes. So if I could say everything the last 3 videos have been about in one word, stop. Once you find this space, you will understand everything you've ever heard in your life with absolute clarity and simplicity. This is the only way to truly let go of the fear and let go of the anxiety. Pills won't do it, drugs won't do it, caffeine definitely won't do it. Letting go will, and learning how. God bless you guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did like this video, please click subscribe, click the like button, go ahead and make a comment. And as always, there is a PayPal link right there in the description box if you want to make a donation. God bless you guys. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.